If you have ever felt completely overwhelmed with teaching and have struggled to find balance within your schedule, then this is the video for you. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Dear Teachers, the weekly show designed to promote self-care and a healthy work-life balance in the teaching profession. I'm your host, Sarah, and in today's episode, we're talking about 6 things that you can do to stop doing so much. As teachers, we really do it all. It doesn't help that a lot of us have a very similar personality type. We really want to help others, and unfortunately, there's a lot of different burdens placed on teachers. I definitely struggled with this too. As a teacher, I felt completely overworked and overwhelmed and had a hard time getting a grasp on everything, especially in my first few years as a teacher. However, eventually I decided, enough is enough. And I set some boundaries and I decided what is most essential. And I cut a lot of the stuff that wasn't. The idea of cutting some of these things out of your work life or doing a little bit less can be a bit uncomfortable to think about at first because maybe we're used to being that people pleaser. We're used to wanting to really go the extra mile, but at what cost? Let's get into the 6 topics to help you stop doing so much. Step 1, stop checking your email so much. How often are you on your email? Is it on your phone? Is it open all day? How many times do you check it during the day? Now, during the school day is a little different. I personally did keep my email open during the school day, but what about when you get home? What about when your school day ends? If you haven't already, I would set some email boundaries. Set a certain time that you're not going to check your email after. Perhaps you have a set time that you check it. No more looking at your email outside of that window. If you do have your school email on your phone, I would highly suggest removing that from your phone or at least turning off the notifications. When we have notifications coming in about these different emails, that can really interrupt the workflow of the day. And at least in my own opinion, as a teacher, most of the emails I received were not incredibly urgent. I didn't have to take action right away. So if we allow ourselves to calm down about it, and you also can set the precedent for your students and perhaps their parents as well, depending on how in contact you are with them, to just know, I'll definitely get back to your message within 24 hours, or maybe if you email me during the weekend on Monday, but I'm not going to be at your beck and call within the hour of sending a message. I also think it's important too if students send concerns in, especially at the secondary level, we see this happen where students will email. I think it's important to discuss not only email etiquette with your students, but also email boundaries. It might be helpful to stop doing all of the extracurriculars. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into extracurricular activities. Sometimes it's because we love it. Sometimes it's because we did that activity, or maybe our friends also coach the activity with us. And also, real talk, a lot of times we do it for the money because that's one of the few ways that you can bump up your salary as a teacher or get that extra stipend. But are you doing too many activities? Is it cutting into your own family life or your work-life balance? The thing that I have found is it feels so good to leave the school right away and be out of there by 3 or 3:30, depending on your school hours, rather than 5:30 or 6. During my first 3 years of teaching, I was doing all the extracurriculars, 4 or 5 of them, depending on the time of year, and it's just too much. It means you're at school way too long. The sad truth is when you break down your hourly rate, for most of the activities, that $1,000 or $2,000 stipend sounds nice up front, but when you realize you're actually only getting paid $6 an hour, that sucks. It may not be worth your time, especially if you don't love it. I'm not saying get rid of everything, but if there's one extracurricular activity that you don't like as much, cut it. It can also be really important to align with other aspects of balance. For instance, my husband Jake, who's also a teacher, he stopped coaching cross country this year because he's getting his master's degree. And that was a really healthy trade-off. And he said multiple times he doesn't know how he'd be able to do both of them. So really set those boundaries for yourself. You don't have to do it all. The next category to stop doing, stop grading everything. Grading is exhausting and I don't think is typically a favorite part of the job for most people. So only grade the essential assignments and activities. One of the most frustrating things is when you spent a lot of time grading something, you added meaningful comments, and then you see half of them end up in the recycling bin after you've passed the papers back to your students. Do they even read the comments? So let's try to avoid some of that. And there's 3 different things that I have done to help with this and reduce grading load. Number 1 is to grade as you go. Something that evolved over time, last year I actually started doing this. I had students bring up their homework for me to check in. I had a laptop on a cart and students would line up. I'd take a look at their assignment and plug it into the grade book right away. And this was amazing. I would do it when kids were working on something, typically their bell work activity. And it was so nice because obviously I'm using that class time to actually meaningfully connect with a student. I can talk to them directly if there's an issue like, what happened? Or it seems like you're stuck on this section. I can take a quick look right away and give real-time feedback, which is amazing. And it also prevents weird grade issues from happening. Sometimes there's that awkward dynamic where a student calls you out for not checking in an assignment when they actually never checked it in with you. Or maybe you make a mistake and they get really stressed out. When you do it in person there's less likely that there's going to be an issue. As well as it's real-time feedback. I have to admit, so many times I collect an assignment, I don't actually look at it for several days. Maybe longer. It's totally happened. And when you wait so long after the assignment, it kind of becomes forgotten about by both you as well as the students, and there's just no way you're really providing meaningful feedback. Another approach to speed up your grading is to periodically use the Oprah strategy. I don't know if anyone else calls it this, but basically you get the points, you get the points, you get the points, kind of a concept. If there are more relaxed assignments where I could give people, just go through for completion, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, I'll take a look around the room. Does it look like everyone's working? Are they giving their best effort? Did they all participate in the simulation? Whatever it is, if it's something that I can give points to everyone for, I'll do that. Plug in the points, easy, quick. There's just a button in our grade book that would allow you to do full credit for everything. This is not something that's used all the time, but periodically, probably at least once every 2 weeks. It's kind of like participation points if you do that, but I think used periodically, this can be a helpful approach. And one last unconventional strategy, but maybe I'm not the only one who's used this before, is the magical cabinet approach, where you decide, I'm not going to grade this. And you put it into the magical cabinet, which is just any of your cabinets that you have in your classroom, and the papers just sit there for a while, and you have no intention of grading them, but if a kid asks about it, then you have their paper in there. It's not an ideal situation, but I've definitely done it every year, at least a couple times. So maybe that's a way you can take a little bit of the stress off yourself. The next strategy is to stop writing so much on the board or wherever else you're writing things. Since we are in so much of a digital age, writing things is totally great. I still like to write out different to-do lists sometimes and that sort of thing, but unfortunately with writing, we typically have to write it out, and we're going to have to write it out the next year and later on. It's repetitive. If you type something, it's a lot easier for you to reuse that in the future. Repurpose bell work posts. Copy and paste old standards and objectives from last year's lessons in your official lesson planning document rather than having to rewrite everything from scratch. Again, it totally depends on your personal preference, but save yourself the time. I know one of the best shifts I made for myself was going from handwriting either objectives or the agenda for the day or even current event headlines on the actual physical board and instead just typed it out. It was so much faster and it didn't take up valuable time in the morning before students arrived. If it will save you time, go for it. Number 5, stop doing it all yourself. Did you know that you've got a class full of students who would really like to help you and help out when they can? I have always found that students love helping out with different tasks, and classroom jobs are amazing and not just for elementary school. I do have a classroom jobs related resource I'll leave in the description field of this video, but even if you didn't start your year with classroom jobs, it's never too late to put them into effect. They can make your life so much easier, especially with dealing with certain tasks that maybe you find a little bit tedious or annoying. Across the board, students like to help out, and it also gives you a chance to help them develop leadership skills. So it's really a win-win. If you haven't given up some of those responsibilities to your students, why wait? And the last thing I hope that you'll stop doing so much is to stop saying yes to everything. In teaching, we say yes to a lot of stuff. Now, a lot of the time we can't really say no to it. It's maybe part of the job. But if we really take a closer look, and if you can pause a little bit before you say yes to an optional meeting or helping out with a certain activity after school, that can save you a lot of time and allow you to have more of that work-life balance. Again, it feels uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been the type of person who always says yes, but there is no expectation and nowhere in your contract where it says you must say yes to everything that is asked of you. One thing I've often said to people on my minimalism channel is every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So if you say yes to an activity, you're also saying no to having some you time and relaxing at home. But if you say no to that event, now you've said yes to an afternoon for yourself. Say yes to yourself more often rather than the school demands. Ultimately, I want the best for you, and I want you to feel like you've got control and are able to find balance in the teaching profession. If you'd like to check out our past episode of Dear Teachers, you can do that up here, as well as our episode of We Teach History. And you can subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.